general managers in its proud history had 4 in 10 years. Harold Ballard wanted nothing more than to return the Leafs to glory. But this era would have no happy ending.
We can joke all we want.
They all run. Wait a minute now.
The people out there.
Wait a minute, I'm talking
right?
too, you know. Wait a minute. I run the club. I pay the bills, so I got a chance to talk, right?
Yes.
All right. Now, what's your question?
When you were a Leaf fan in the 80s, you expected the worst.
The 80s were such a departure from former Leaf decades. I mean, it was so dismal to do Leaf games.
But for such a dark decade, it wasn't all bad.
1985 draft, Wendell Clark comes in.
Clark coming in with Cordick. Scores! Wendell Clark, a bullet, and it's 4-0.
Refreshing. Here's a kid. He's going to knock players into the boards. He can score goals. He's fearless. They loved him in Toronto.
But even Wendell Clark had no cure for what ailed the Leafs.
You would get a great player like Vive come along with a 50-goal season, and then another, and a third, and later on you'd get a Wendell Clark, but they were bereft of other talent, and other coaches and managers made terrible decisions.
Like 1 year we were out of playoffs, 10 games before the last game, then it was just like, wow, how are we gonna keep this up? Play for really nothing.
You had to be a hockey fan, not a Leaf fan, because if you were a Leaf fan, you'd be heartbroken because they were going nowhere.
You, 15,700, represent the fans who've been here for 7 decades to cheer on the men in the blue and white in the 1990s. Mike Gartner. Ladies and gentlemen, Mats Sundin.
As the 80s ended, so too did the Leafs' decade-long malaise. Their knight in shining armor would arrive from the West in the person of Cliff Fletcher, one of the game's best GMs. Fletcher had built a powerhouse in Calgary that won the Cup in '89. Now he was eager to try to return Canada's team to prominence.
Toronto's the hockey capital of the world, without a doubt in my mind, and the buzz that goes on there on an ongoing basis, and the interest in the team is just tremendous. So when I had an opportunity to go there, I just couldn't walk away from it.
Cliff Fletcher came in, and I've always admired him as a manager in the league. I had watched him put together a pretty good team when I was coaching and managing in Vancouver. So when the Leafs got him, I knew that they had a guy who knew how to put a team together and maybe resurrect the franchise.
After just 6 months at the Leafs' helm, Fletcher engineered the largest trade in NHL history, a 10-player blockbuster with his former team.
It was one of the most unique trades ever made, in that I was only a couple months removed from Calgary, and I probably knew more about the players I was acquiring than the players I was giving up, who I'd only been with for a couple of months.
One player in the deal would eventually succeed beyond the Maple Leafs' wildest dreams.
I was in Calgary, New Year's Day, and they called me and said I was traded to Toronto. And, there's not too many times that you jump up and down when you get traded. So I was excited about the situation and obviously the possibilities.
Shortly after arriving from Calgary, Doug Gilmour was Mr. Maple Leaf and grabbed this team by the throat and led them to some very enjoyable spots.
While Gilmour injected heart and soul into the Leafs on the ice, Pat Burns called the shots behind the bench. Toronto would go on to face the powerful Detroit Red Wings in the playoffs' first round. The Leafs battled Detroit to a standstill through 6 games, but winning a 7th game at Joe Louis Arena was still a formidable task.
Going into Game 7 there, I don't even think our families were so sure we had a chance to win that game.
7th game going back in their building, and we were down, and we ended up scoring in the last minute, taking it into overtime.
Can you believe it? We are going to overtime. Oh, my heavens. Clark shoving it to the corner. Out front
was one of the crowning touches in Toronto, and that really put the franchise back on the map. It brought back the credibility it had been missing for a few seasons.
Maple Leaf fever gripped the city for the first time in years. And against St. Louis, Doug Gilmour weaved more magic in the second overtime of Game 2.
Gilmour back in the net.
I got kind of set up behind the net and really didn't know which way to go.
Chuck in front with Borshevsky. And it is Gilmour waiting.
Kind of made a circle move, and Andreychuk was at the side. Borshevsky was in front of the net.
Around the net, waiting, he's open. Gilmour! Solo job! And he's won it in a second overtime period. All about that. The best player ends the best game in the best fashion right here.
For some reason, it got through there. Again, it was exciting times that whole that playoff run.
Is there any stop to the drama that this Maple Leaf team keeps coming up with?
That was unbelievable. It was just something that the whole city was caught up in every game. It was very exciting to play in that time.
The euphoria would last all the way to Game 7 of the Western Conference Finals, when the pride of Brantford, Ontario, ended the joyride.
Gretzky coming for the net. On the outside, now he's in front. Score! Gretzky banked it in off one of the Leaf players, and the LA Kings have taken a 5-3 lead. And a heartbreaking loss for the Maple Leafs tonight.
Despite the disappointment, the franchise had enjoyed its finest hour in recent memory. Pat Burns captured Coach of the Year honors, and Doug Gilmour took home the Selke Award. The blue and white were once again a force to be reckoned with. By the mid-90s, Steve Stavro had become the majority owner of the Maple Leafs, bringing stability to the franchise. The club was also in transition on the ice. Fan favorite Wendell Clark was traded to Quebec for Matt Sundin, giving the Leafs the young superstar they needed.
If you were to put together a player and you had the ability to choose all the assets that a player could have, whether it be size, speed, scoring ability, touch, he has it all. And he's a leader.
The puck goes over this side, I move out, you come back down.
He can make something happen out of nothing near every shift.
When Sundin seemed primed to become the NHL's first European captain in 1997, he sought the advice of his boyhood idol, Borje Salming.
Well, I think it was in the summer, he was talking to me.
I knew I was going to maybe get asked, and I remember asking Borje, and he said,
just take it, because it's the best you can do.
He got asked to be the captain for Toronto Maple Leafs, and he wasn't sure, and he ended up saying no.
For myself, I think it was the language, all kinds of stuff. I was in the dressing room and on the ice, I was probably the captain anyways when Darryl was gone.
He said, for sure you should say yes, it's a great honor, it's something you should definitely do.
But even Sundin's magic was not enough on its own. When Ken Dryden became the club's new president and acting GM, he knew more moves had to be made. First, he installed Pat Quinn, a former Leaf, as head coach in June of '98. But his most brilliant stroke came when Curtis Joseph donned the blue and white.